Hello and welcome to today's online service. I'm coming to you from my newly acquired space of living at the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges in Melbourne, NA. Because I'm so close to the national park, I can hear the early morning birdsong and smell the beautiful smell of nature in all its ferns, wood, grass, and fresh air. It's been really lovely to connect with the land here in a wholesome and nourishing way, to honour and recognise the traditional owners and custodians of the lands I live on, the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and in doing so, also extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples wherever they be. At the time of writing and recording this, it's the last week of June, with National Reconciliation Week having been at the beginning of June and the winter solstice just gone by last weekend. Both significant events on the calendar for different, yet not dissimilar, reasons. National Reconciliation Week is a dedicated time for all Australians to learn about shared histories, cultures, and achievements. It is an opportunity to explore how every individual can contribute to meaningful reconciliation between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous Australians. The winter solstice is an event marking the shortest day and longest night of the year. Typically, winter calls for rest and recuperation after the shedding and letting go of things that no longer serve us in autumn, and before the renewal and rebirth in spring. In the Celtic tradition, the Newgrange winter solstice phenomenon is a 5,000-year-old architectural marvel, where the monument's design connects the living and the dead. This is done by the first beam of sunlight after the longest night coming through the tomb and illuminating the inner chamber, symbolizing a spiritual journey, hope, an eternal cycle of renewal. There are some interesting symbolic and thematic similarities between National Reconciliation Week and the winter solstice, even though they come from very different traditions. Overall, both honour the past, embrace the present, and inspire us to move together toward greater light. Both encourage people to pause and reflect. National Reconciliation Week invites Australians to reflect on the history of relationships between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous Australians, including truth-telling about past injustices. The winter solstice has long been a time for contemplation, looking inward and taking stock of where we have been before moving forward. Both carry a sense of transformation. Reconciliation is about renewing relationships, building trust, and creating a shared future. As mentioned earlier, the winter solstice has traditionally symbolised rebirth, renewal, and the start of a new cycle. Both often involve coming together. Reconciliation Week includes community events, conversations, ceremonies, walks, and educational activities. Solstice celebrations across many cultures involve communal gatherings, such as our Temple Society Sonvent Fair, storytelling, shared meals, music, and ritual. Both contain an element of optimism. Reconciliation is not only about understanding the past, but also creating a better future together. The winter solstice reminds us that after the darkest point, the days gradually become longer and brighter. And in both cases, there is an underlying theme that confronting darkness can lead to greater light, understanding, and hope. Reconciliation involves acknowledging difficult truths and historical harms while working toward healing and a more just future. The winter solstice marks the longest night of the year, but also the turning point when longer daylight begins to return. I'd like to read you a story about lightness and darkness and the ever-important balance between the two, showing that we truly cannot have one without the other. The light and the dark are like twins, an adaptation from Celebrating Darkness, which appeared on December 4, 2015 in the Nature's Path blog at patheus.com and is written by Reverend Erica Barron. Once upon a time, there lived people who loved the light. As soon as the sun rose every morning, they were up to welcome it, singing songs of celebration. And when the sun went down each evening, they sang other songs, sad songs, songs of missing the light of the sun. They loved the light so very much, but they did not love the darkness. Once darkness fell every night, they would hurry to bed, since they could only bear the darkness when they were asleep. The people's dearest wish was that the sun would not set in the evening, that darkness would never fall. But every day the sun set, and they sang their sad songs, and they endured the fearful, sad, strange darkness until they could greet the sun again the next day. Now in this land were born two remarkable and magical children, twins. One was a girl, and she seemed to shine from within. Whenever she entered a room, everything seemed to get a little brighter, and the people loved her very much. She had the power to bring life back when it was harmed or lost. The other was a boy, and he seemed to bring darkness with him. Whenever he entered a room, everything seemed a little dimmer, and the people did not like him. They feared him because he reminded them of the great darkness of the night. He had the power to calm and quiet anything and could bring anything to stillness. The people's love for the light and the fear of the darkness only grew with time, and so they decided to ask the girl for a favor. They asked her to see if her magic could hold the sun in the sky and stop the night from coming. One day, just as the sun was at its highest point, she went out onto the top of the highest hill in the land, and she threw her arms up into the sky, and she asked the sun to stop, to stay right there at the top of the sky forever. And stop it did. The people were overjoyed. There was a big celebration, and they sang all of their songs celebrating the sun. For the first week or so, everyone was happy and content. But soon they began to get tired. Although they had always slept with a fire to ward off the darkness, sleeping in the full light of the sun was another thing altogether. They tossed and turned and woke up constantly. Some of them remembered that the boy could help with sleep and asked for his aid, but his power of bringing sleep seemed to have disappeared along with the darkness. After a while, the exhausted, frustrated people began to see that this constant sunlight was a problem. Though they still loved the light, they began to wish that the sun would once again move in the sky, and they finally decided that something must be done. They went back to the girl and asked her to get the sun to move again. It was her magic that had stopped it, and they figured her magic could make it move. So she went back up onto the top of the highest hill, threw her arms up into the sky, and asked the sun to move. Nothing happened. She tried again, and a third time, but the sun stayed still. Sadly, she turned to the people and told them there was nothing she could do. There was a long moment of growing panic before the boy stepped forward. "Let me try," he said softly. He took his sister's place on the top of the highest hill, threw his arms up to the sky, and asked the sun to move. The sun began moving at once, rushing toward the western horizon. Within minutes it had set, and before long it was full dark night. The people were caught off guard. They had all come out to the hill to see if the girl's magic would work, They had no fires lit. They hadn't needed them in weeks. They had nothing with them to light their way. They had never been outside at night before, and they were terrified. But then one of them looked up. "Oh," she explained, "looked." Everyone looked up, and then they all saw the stars for the first time. They had never been outside at night before and had no idea of the incredible beauty of a sky full of stars. People rested and were glad and appreciated the darkness for the first time in their lives. Eventually, the sun rose again. As it did, the people got out of their beds and sang their songs to celebrate the coming of the light. But at the end of the day, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they did not feel like singing their sad songs. Instead, one of the musicians began singing a new song, a slow, quiet song of thanksgiving for the night. And soon the others joined in. It became their new sunset song. The people remembered that light and darkness are best in balance. Holding that balance between light and dark could be likened to holding a perspective that we see as ours and being open to someone else's at the same time. It can be a really challenging thing to acknowledge and accept something that may not suit us, that we don't agree on, or are not aligned with. Yet, being open to trying to understand a different perspective means that we are able to show respect and honor those different views. Just because something may be different does not make it less or worthy of hate. I'd like to now share an excerpt that I pulled from the Templar Reflections publication of July 2022 on reality and perceptions of reality. This piece is written by author and screenwriter Jutta Goetze, and I feel it's poignant in showcasing how empowering it can be to hold and even embody someone else's perception. It is titled Writing Reality. Objective, based on fact without any personal views. Subjective, based wholly on one's experience and feeling. So, writing reality, how does that work? Whose reality are we talking about? Is it the writer's reality, the world the writer has fashioned for the reader to read, the viewer to see? Is it the reader's and viewer's interpretation? Or is it a combination of both? Who can verify the many facts that have been woven into each story? And who can say how each individual interprets the stories they absorb? My writing is guided by what I think and what I feel. Whatever my driving creative force is, I look for a sense of community, communality, and communion with my readers and viewers. I bring my understanding of the world I see into what I write. This is my reality. I depend on the subjective, but I do not ignore the objective. How then can I write from the viewpoint of a policeman? How can I tell a story through the eyes of a man or a 10-year-old child, of a dog if my character is canine? How could I write from a black man's perspective in a time that is close to 160 years past, which is what I have agreed to do, writing the story of the all-Indigenous cricket team that left Australian shores in 1868 to play cricket at Lord's in England. A story of the past, of a sport I have scant knowledge of young black men who were warriors of their clans, whose land had been stolen and whose people were rapidly dying out. How on earth can a white woman of a certain age write anything close to the reality of the experiences of the first international sporting team to leave these shores? What did they feel? Why did they go? Who were they? And why would I even attempt writing their story? because I would never attempt it alone, because I honor the privilege and do not disrespect the many, many people whose help I need to begin to understand, not just in an intellectual way, but with an instinctive, intuitive antenna that forms a part of my writer's toolkit. I check and I cross-check. I incorporate the known facts, knowing that many are recorded by white settlers who had no understanding of the Indigenous languages or peoples around them. I work with an Indigenous writer who comes from the area the first 11 came from. We have a cultural advisor who is an elder of the Wotjuk people and is a great-great-grandson of one of the cricketers. Their combined cultural knowledge, their hands-on experience of being Wotjuk men with a particular way of looking at and thinking will inform the scenes we write. My contribution is my expertise in television, a function of structure and visual storytelling, but it is much more than just format. It is finding the sensitivity, the ability to listen, to hear, and the patience to be able to, over time, understand, interpret, and recreate this story that will throw new colours onto the canvas of Australian history. And there is a caveat. Strong stories utilise sequence, the choice and order, not just the what, but the how of presenting scenes. This means the story that we tell, with the same facts, would be different to the story someone else relays. The process of television means writing and rewriting. And for this series in particular, it means listening to a vast number of people. It involves researching, reading more and more words that need to be sieved and mined and reinterpreted and, wherever possible, seen through the eyes of our First Nations people, whose many communities will, once the scripts are written, read and reread every single word. Our scripts are totally dependent on the people we listen to. So it is the objective reality of thousands, not just of our team. Our words will capture and fashion the mood of an era. We will bring to the screen men who should be legends in sporting halls of fame. Our depiction will embody some of their truth, will show some of their reality, and through that, will hopefully offer 1 degree more understanding of both then and now. But I still can't answer the question of whether it is objective or subjective reality. I straddle that fence, a leg on each side, perhaps by glimpsing an interpretation of a story's reality, we begin to change future realities. Or perhaps we are simply reminded of what we universally share. Does skin color really matter? Or which century we live in? Or even whether we are male or female? When we share the same reality, we are all human after all. I'd like you to please take a moment to sit in silence whilst I share a prayer with you. May God bless us with discomfort. Discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live from deep within our hearts. May we be blessed with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people and our earth, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May we be blessed with tears to shed, tears for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that we may reach out our hand to comfort them and turn their pain to joy. May we be blessed with foolishness, enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in this world, so that we can do what others claim cannot be done. And may we grant ourselves intervals to just be in silence, appreciation, and gratitude, so that our hearts and minds may be restored. Amen. To end today's contemplation, I'd like to share with you a video I came across on Instagram. It talks about reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, the act of saying, I'm sorry, and what acknowledging the true Australian history can actually accomplish. It makes me think back to conversations I've had with descendants of migrants who had been brought to Australia, either begrudgingly or against their will, and their own displacement impacting their identity. Where there is confusion and conflict around the responsibility these descendants hold in regard to the colonisation of Australia. I hope the lens through which this video is shown can bring some understanding and openness around accepting a different perspective.
I did not poison waterholes. I did not ride into massacres at dawn. I did not force families to the edge of towns where the dust settled thicker than opportunity. I did not steal children from mothers whose screams still echo through generations. I did not help breed out the black. I did not outlaw language, ceremony, skin, or song. I did not decide who counted as human enough to vote, human enough to marry, human enough to exist freely on the oldest continuing culture on earth. I did not stand at cliffs while people chose the rocks below over the cruelty rushing towards them. I did not write history books that swallowed entire truths whole and handed children silence instead. I did not do those things, but they happened. And a nation that refuses to speak honestly about its own scars will keep tearing them open in secret. Because saying sorry has never meant I personally committed the crime. When my friend loses her father, I say, I am sorry. Not because I caused the death, not because I carry responsibility for the illness, the accident, the terrible moment the phone rang. I say sorry because grief deserves witness, because kindness sometimes sounds like I see your pain. If someone tells me they are hurting, I do not interrupt to defend myself from an accusation never made. I do not demand they reassure me that I am one of the good ones. I simply sit beside the wound and acknowledge it exists. That is what sorrow is supposed to do. And that is what reconciliation asks of us. Not inherited guilt, not endless punishment, not hatred of the modern Australia, just honesty, just humanity, just the basic decency of recognising suffering when it stands before us. Because Aboriginal people were here before this nation had fences, roads or flags, and what happened to them is not opinion, it is not political correctness, it is not a trend people invented online, it's our history, factual, documented, woven into the fabric of this country, whether people feel comfortable with it or not. And when we refuse to acknowledge that pain, when we mock it, diminish it, erase it, we do something dangerous. We tell people their suffering only matters if it never inconveniences anyone else. And then we wonder why some Australians feel othered in their own land. Reconciliation is not about rewriting the past. It is about refusing to lie about it. It is about understanding that compassion is not an admission of guilt. It's good manners and good hearts and good humanity. And perhaps a country becomes stronger, not when it pretends terrible things never happened, but when it finally grows brave enough to say, I'm sorry, that should never have happened to you, and you deserve better. And collectively, we will never allow it to happen to anyone again.
So from me, thank you for joining me today.